Good morning, frothers, and welcome back to another brew day at Wheatlow Brewery. We've got an exciting beer today for you because we've got an old school session American pale ale with Amarillo hops. And we're going to talk about the recipe, talk about the style American pale ale, brew the beer, pour a frothing pint, compare keg versus cask as well, probably, and taste the beer at the end of the video. So stick with us. There's a lot to get in this video today. Stick with us and we'll have a frothing ale at the end. This American pale ale that we're brewing today is loosely based on a Brewdog recipe from DIY dog called Peroxide Punk, which is a 4% session American pale ale. And it's heavily based on Amarillo hops. So it should be really good for the summer, easy drinking, could work well on keg, but also will probably work well on cask as well. In fact, I'll probably split it 50-50 this time. So what is an American pale ale, you might ask? In the 70s and 80s, if you looked at brewing around the world, you might say that the British have got their styles, best bitters and so on, and the Germans have got their styles, the Czechs have got their styles, the Belgians have got their styles. Well, in America, at that time, it was largely what you might call international pale lager. And there was a lack of styles that you might call properly American. Well, American pale ale is a style that has very much become a stalwart of American styles of beer that have remained. And they came about when, in the 70s and 80s, the new American hops, the C hops, if you like, were coming out. Cascade, Centennial, things like that, Chinook. And the brewers at the time, the microbrewers, Sierra Nevada, of course, being a famous one, looked at some of the British beers and decided that they could brew beers along those lines, but using these new, more piney, citrusy hops from their own country. So Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, for example, many say is an emulation of a British ESB. So within British Pale Ale, there are three categories, really. There is ordinary bitter, best bitter, and then ESB or strong bitter. Sierra Nevada Pale, I think, was an emulation more towards a strong bitter. So these would typically have up to 10% crystal malt, and they would have a two-row malt, although they'd probably use an American one, and then they'd use these new hops that would give this much more vibrant hop character to the beer. So a British pale ale, you might be thinking when you design the recipe, how can we create balance between beautiful British malt and English hops, North Down, Challenger, Fuggles, Goldings, that kind of thing. If you're creating a recipe for an American pale ale, you might be thinking, how can we make these beautiful American hops shine and show their lovely citrusy, piney, tropical fruit type characters, and in a way where the malt supports that shining of the hops rather than completely balances it. So they are relatively balanced in terms of being very drinkable. American IPAs would be much more hoppy and bitter and so on. So an APA. So in terms of the technical specifications, an American pale ale can be quite similar in the actual numbers for bitterness to a British bitter. However, the hops would make the perceived bitterness perhaps higher, certainly the perceived hop character, and you would tend to use more of these hops late in the boil in the Whirlpool, and often a heavy dry hop as well. So with all that in mind, this recipe is a simple base malt with a couple of additions to the pale malt. I've written down my risotto, but actually it's a bit of a use it up day today. So I've got some Planet Pale mostly and a bit of crisp pale as well. So 93% of that pale malt. And then I've done a little bit of caramelt, 5.8%, and a tiny, tiny bit, 1.1% of medium crystal, just to give us a little bit more of a golden colour. So it's not too insipid or pale in colour. So typically an American pale ale would use a little bit more crystal if it was what you might call an old-fashioned one from the early days. And nowadays it might use a tiny amount of crystal or caramel malt, or even just a little bit of wheat malt or torrefied wheat or something like that. So they've evolved in a way that uses a little bit less crystal and less caramelly flavors. So this one's a bit more old school because we've got those caramel malts in there. And I'll go through the hop schedule in a minute when I start weighing them out. I'm using water profile that we use for neck oil, which is 5-to-1 actually sulfates to chloride, roughly 250 to 50 with 100 parts per million calcium as well. So we're going to ferment it with USO5 or LAX actually today, which is the WHC version of this. So let's mash in and we'll come back and talk a little bit more about this beer. Right, time to sparge the American Pale Ale. So I'm running it off already. Some sparge to the top. So water profile for this American Pale Ale is going to be exactly the same as that we used for neck oil, and that is about 5-to-1 sulfates to chloride ratio. So definitely want to make the sulfates pop here to make the hops pop in this beer. We want the sulfates much higher than the chlorides. That'll help push the malt a little bit to the back. But in return, later we'll be delicate with the hops by using them in quite a fairly cool Whirlpool. So we will end up with hopefully quite a balanced beer. So I'm just weighing out some gypsum now, that being where most of the sulfates will come from. So I'll put it on the screen. Also plenty of calcium, 100 parts per million of calcium as well, to help this beer get nice and clear as well. So I'll weigh the rest of these out and we'll get them in. Right, the hop bill on this American Pale Ale is predominantly about Amarillo. So Amarillo is an American hop, and the famous, or the headline flavors are orange and tangerine. But reading through the description, just to make sure I got my facts right, while the primary characteristic is orange, Amarillo hops bring a complex range of flavors to the palate. Citrus, sweet Valencia orange, tangerine, pink grapefruit and lemon zest. Stone fruit, ripe peaches and apricot. Tropical fruit, melon and subtle hints of pineapple or mango. Floral and herbal, soft wildflowers like background with a whisper of noble, spicy or earthy undertones. So that sounds like quite a lot in one bag of hops, in one kind of hops, doesn't it? So get into it, I'll sniff it. Well, whoever's picked that lot out is a cleverer man than me, certainly. Anyway, I need 140 grams at the start of the boil, which is 27.7 IBUs. In fact, I need to check the alpha on these. So I'll get 140 in there and then adjust it. So these are 8.2. The recipe says 9.2. So if I do 140 times 9.2 divided by 8.2, that'll give me 157 is what I need to get that bitterness of 27 IBUs at 8.2 rather than 9.2, so I need a bit more. So that is my first addition. I'll go put that in now, and then later on we're not going to put anything else in now until the Whirlpool, actually, at 80 degrees, where we're going to put Amarillo 4.4 IBUs, similar amount in terms of quantity, Simcoe 5.3 IBUs, a bit of Crystal 1.2 IBUs, and we're also putting a little bit of Hallertauer Mittelfrüh in my case. I was going to put Hersbrucker in, but I've only got Mittelfrüh in stock. So that's the Whirlpool hops, so 1.4 IBUs of Hallertauer, 1.2 IBUs of Crystal, and then we're going to do a dry hop later of 500 grams, which is roughly 3.5 grams per litre of Amarillo and Simcoe combined. So I'll come back to that in a minute and weigh those out in advance. Right, the boil's finished. I've cooled it down to 85, and I've got this lot to put in the Whirlpool. So, smell delicious. I'll go and put them in the Whirlpool now, and we'll Whirlpool them for 20 minutes spinning, and then we'll let it rest for 10 or 15 minutes as well, and then you've got the transfer time beyond that. Although it will cool as well during that process. Now these days, usually if I've got the same hops going in to the dry hop and I've already got them out, I've been weighing them out at the same time, putting them back in a bag, keeping them in the fridge until dry hop time. Helps me to remember and saves time if you just want to do it one night after work. They're pre-measured out. So that is 250 of Amarillo. Smell amazing. And then we want 250 of Simcoe as well for this one. So use the old Amarillo bag. Squeeze the air out and I'll label them up appropriately. And go pop that in the fridge. Super. Right, that's brew day done. Got a nice quantity, bang on the numbers. It's 1039, exactly where we wanted it to be. LAX is 50 to 150 grams per hectolitre, sorry. So I'm going for 0.76 grams per litre, which is just a round figure of 100 grams for this one. So I'll put that in now. It's only weak, so that should be fine. So yeast's in, seal him up, put the spunding valve on with no pressure. Right, let's set the temperature. Let's go for 19 to start with. Can raise it up a little bit as it gets going. So, there we go. Brew day done. Super. Right, it's time to dump the cone on the American Pale Ale. Fermentation's just about finished, and I've got a sanitised jug here because I want to re-pitch this yeast. It's only lax, but since I'm brewing a beer that needs that today, I may as well reuse it. So let's have a go at that. Super. Get the dry hop in the American Pale Ale now. No, we can't because it's too hot. I just realised I've forgotten to cool it down to 14, so I'll do that first. Right, I have already dumped the cone on this yesterday, but I'm going to just see if there's anything else in it. So another 2 litres out of that again. Nothing left. And now I've got no carbonation stone already in this, which is a mistake when I set the tank up. I used the carbonation stone to run CO2 through it, and therefore mix it up and keep a positive pressure of CO2 when I'm adding the dry hop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect one right at the bottom, which is why I wanted to dump the cone again, so it didn't just push all the yeast up. So I'm going to add this sight glass. So I've just loosened the top one to just let that purge itself of oxygen. Okay, so now that's bubbling through. I'll release the pressure. Add a bit of vitamin C, ascorbic acid, just to help with it preventing oxidation. It's a bit more big bubbly, this one is. Look, I'll show you. So get the hops in. Amarillo and Simcoe in this one. Just let it burp out of there a bit in case any oxygen's just gone in. And that's what the beer looks like. It's time to cast the Angel Pale Ale. I've got them ready in the tanks here. 2 beers to cast today, Pacific Ale and Angel Pale Ale. And I've got my casks washing behind me, or sanitising I should say. So get them into cask. What I'm going to do is put half cask, half keg actually. So I'm going to put 2/3 into cask, and so that should leave me enough for 2 kegs worth. So we can do some canning as well from the kegs. I think they'd be better as real ales, but they're probably both designed to be keg beers, really. Anyway, we'll get cracking and get this beer canned up. Get this beer casked up.
this one. It's about 20.5 kilos worth of wood. Half of it's on top here, isn't it? .41 kilos I'm looking for from this Firkin. Doing it a bit calmer, stopped it overflowing this time. Beautiful. Right, that's the Pacific Ale and the Angel Pale Ale, all casked and kegged. I've got 2 kegs from each and 1 big cask and 2 little casks, so all gone well. finally we get to the tasting, and this is the Angel Pale Ale, and absolutely delighted with the colour of it, and of course that beautiful clarity, as clear as any beer I've made, I think, bright as a button. This is from the hand pull, of course, the cask version. It's been poured a while, but it did pour with a beautiful creamy head, quite nice fine bubbles, and that just looks amazing, doesn't it? Aroma wise, well, you can definitely smell those two American hops, the Simcoe and the Amarillo. So we've got a little bit of brightness, bit sort of fresh, bright, tangerine-y, orangey thing from the Amarillo, and something a bit more dank and grapefruity from the Simcoe. So it should be a good combination. I wouldn't say the aroma's really powerful. One test of that is to see when you can smell it, how close to your nose, and it's about there actually. So this hasn't got a really strong aroma, protected of course by the frothing head perhaps. Yeah, it's actually quite complex and interesting. So you get a bit of that bright orange, that tangerine, you get a bit of grapefruit, a bit of dankness. You've got a good balance from the malt underneath. There's a bit of colour to it as well. It's more of a golden colour than a really pale colour. And a bit of malty character in there as well. I think it works really well on cask actually. We did have it on keg, but I'm afraid I didn't film that because we drank it all too quickly. And I served it actually through a nitrogen spout, but on normal gas, and that poured quite well. The creamy head looked absolutely brilliant on it. Also reasonably dry, medium to light body really. Just a nice easy drinking session beer, like so many of my beers. Golden, easy drinking, 4%. Repetition is the mother of learning, frothers. Would I change anything about this recipe? Well, I sent some cans out actually to some of the frothers, and Hoddy came back to me, and this is more Hoddy's kind of beer than mine, insofar as it's more of a craft beer, more of an American pale ale. It's more hoppy and dry hoppy and Whirlpool hoppy and stuff like that. So he suggested straight away that I'd bottled it a bit with the hops, and I should just really up the job from the 2 grams a litre, 4 grams a litre is now at the moment overall, to at least 8 grams per litre. So in other words, double the dry hop, possibly increase the Whirlpool, probably double the Whirlpool as well. So it would be really interesting to try that to make it more hoppy. But I suppose you've got to remember that it is an American, it's a pale ale. It's supposed to be, not too intense in terms of the flavours. It's not an IPA, so it's supposed to be a little bit more subtle. I think, if you had that on cask in a pub, you'd be really pleased with that. If you went the next step and doubled the dry hop on it, it would be a beautiful beer, I'm sure. But that would make it more, I think, more of an IPA, which would probably suit being on keg better than cask, and perhaps wouldn't be everyone's cup of tea. Might be worth a try though, actually. And Hoddy does know what he's talking about with those kinds of beers, because that is what he brews, a lot of those kinds of beers all the time. So that could be one experiment to do. If you're going to have a go at brewing this, you could stick with it as it is, or you could just simply double the Whirlpool and double the dry hop, or at least double the dry hop, to really get it singing with that hop character. Simcoe sometimes can be a bit harsh, can't it? Grapefruity, piney, that kind of thing. I don't think that's come through on this at this level of hopping. It's not harsh or too grapefruity. It's just the other thing that the original Brewdog recipe said, well, we should be putting this dry hop in halfway through fermentation to get a biotransformation. Now, I bottled that as well. I didn't do that because I've had a couple of experiences where I've done the biotransformation and I haven't liked the result. It's been a little bit sort of hot, burny, harsh flavour from it. I have had some successes as well, like the sweet release, where I've put the hops in during active fermentation. So again, I think probably would have got a little bit more expression from the hops if I'd actually done that and put them in at high Krausen. But overall, pleased with the beer. Sent it out to some other home brewers in cans and got some really good feedback. People said they quite enjoyed that one. I think it's a reasonably successful beer. I'll brew it again. Maybe I will try and up the hops as Hoddy suggests next time, just for a different approach. And I did suggest earlier in the video, didn't I, that I could possibly compare the keg version versus the cask version. Unfortunately, I missed that small window of opportunity, but what I have got is some cans of this beer. So what we can do is try one of them and see if that sort of the character in a keg or a can, i.e. a bit more carbonation, changes the beer much, or whether it's still pretty similar. Bearing in mind Hoddy tasted the can, so he may have had some muted effects of the canning process on the hopping, because I think hops come through reasonably well on the cask. I mean, how would you describe that? It's an ale and it's got a large moosey head. We're a little bit weaker on the clarity actually on the can there, aren't we? Now I wonder, is that because it's live beer, it does perhaps a little bit of something in the can, and even though it was clear when I canned it, it's probably just developed a little bit of sediment and over perhaps been in the can, 3-4 weeks, something like that. Yeah, there is a difference. The carbonation does affect the taste of the beer a little bit. It isn't lifting the hops up, it's kind of, in this case, it's muting the hops a little bit. Changes the mouthfeel, of course, because you've got that tingly carbonation on your tongue. I think it's canned quite nicely, actually. So there you can see the difference in the clarity. It's a pity, isn't it, really? Because when you can something, you really want that to be nice and clear when people pour it, particularly if it's going in a competition or something like that. And a lot of the time, competitions and so on, it's getting the product to the judge, not whether it's good or not to start with, but getting it there in good condition that is the difficult bit. And it's so easy in a cask because the cask's just sitting here in the cellar on a stillage, the sediment settles nicely, and as long as you don't disturb it, it's just absolutely pin bright. But as you can see, that has gone a little bit hazy. Of course, you could filter it, you could pasteurise it or whatever, but we're not really into that, are we, as home brewers? And it doesn't matter, does it, that it's hazy? It doesn't really, I don't think, in this case, I don't think it affects the taste. But if I want a beer to be clear, I want it to be clear. It seems to me like a bit disappointing if I want a beer to be clear and then open the packaging and it isn't. This is why the people say consistency in beer is so difficult, because you put it in a can, it seems perfect, you try it, you look at it, you taste it when you're canning it, but then the beer matures, does something in the can and changes somewhat. And I've had these cans in the cold room ever since I canned them, so the temperature isn't really an issue, but imagine how much different a beer could taste or develop or re-ferment or develop a sort of sediment in it if it was warm. And particularly in the heat waves that we've been having in the UK in the last few weeks, if your canned beer got to 30 degrees sitting on a shelf somewhere, in someone's house or whatever, then it's not going to taste as nice as it would if it had been in the fridge. And with a commercial beer, we've all mistreated commercial beers, haven't we? But they'll be filtered, they'll be pasteurised, and they'll stand up a lot more of that. Still won't do it particularly good, but it will stand a lot more of that. Whereas handcrafted, live, unfiltered, unpasteurised beer is quite delicate, and we have to always keep beers in the fridge. So let us know in the comments what you think of this beer, and whether you're going to try it with this level of hopping, or whether you're going to do, as Hoddy suggests, double the hopping in it. And when does the beer change from being a pale ale to an IPA? Answers in the comments, please. Also, what's your favourite recipe from DIY Dog? DIY Dog, by the way, if you're not aware, is a PDF that's available online. Just search for DIY Dog or something like that, or Brewdog DIY Dog. And it's got loads of original recipes in that Brewdog published a few years ago. Quite useful if you want to have a go at some of those beers. So let us know in the comments what your favourite Brewdog recipe is from DIY Dog, and maybe one day I'll have a go at that one as well. So now I'm going to finish this pint until next week, when I'll see you again for another frothing ale. Cheers.